What up, Player Profiler faithful? It's your boy Matty Kiwoom. Welcome to the latest episode of The Game Plan, an absolute banger of an episode set up for each and every one of you viewers today. First and foremost, make sure you're subscribed to the Player Profiler YouTube channel. Smash that like button and get ready to leave us a comment, because my guest tonight and I are we're gonna dive into some early takes, some early breakdowns for the redraft leagues out there, and you're not going to want to miss this one. It's going to be loaded with secrets that you need to take down your league mates, and I have a very, very special guest. So, ladies and gentlemen, get out your pens and get out your pads, and let's get ready to start game planning to dominate in our redraft leagues. Planners, you are very familiar with my guest here today. He is the host of the Dominator. You can find that right here on the Player Profiler network of shows. My man, Josh Larky. What's going on, Josh?
Matty, I'm ready for this. We'll call this the reunion, because we were out in Detroit together for the draft, and I'm ready for this. We're going to talk a little schedule. We're going to talk some redraft takes.
Oh, I know you. The Detroit days. It feels like just last night, but it was now, almost 2 months ago. I mean, it's been a whole month. It's been crazy. But we put the seedlings in the soil. We tended to this possibility there in Detroit, and now we're cultivating the beautiful crops that is the game plan. And today's episode, I'm very excited. I'm excited to just talk to you in general. But today I'm very excited to dive in, because you've been doing some work here at Player Profiler, whether it be, in your show, The Dominator, or through articles and Twitter as well, or X, whatever you want to call it. But you've kind of dove into each and every team, all 32 teams here in the NFL. You've dove into the schedule. So now I want to pick your brain on some of your findings, some takes that you may have developed, and let's get some of those secrets out there for those redrafters. So I'm going to start with the first question. So can you list a couple of advantages that you found when looking over the 24 NFL schedule that people can utilize in their redraft leagues? Or also, we'll call it too, for the Dynasty players, the Win Now Dynasty guys. So the 1 year, 24 sample size. What were some of the takeaways that you found that we can get these guys some advantages?
Let's start off with two takes. The first one, Steelers' schedule is brutal. I have them as the number one toughest schedule this year. A decision point for redraft will really be Jalen Warren versus Najee Harris. The ADPs look pretty similar on Underdog. I think they're going to end up both being kind of like 6th, 7th round type picks. And I would lean Jalen Warren. He was 5th in the NFL last year among running backs and receptions. Let me tell you how brutal the schedule is, because you might be like, all right, Josh, you say it's the toughest schedule. Give me actual names of opponents. So I have the Steelers. I don't even think, first I'll say this. We'll talk about this more later, but like I don't even think the Steelers are a bad team. I'll say that to begin with. I don't think the Steelers are bad. I only have them favored to win 4 games. At the Broncos suck. At the Raiders stink. At the Commanders, not there yet. And then when they host the New York Giants. Let's talk about some of the games that are less exciting in terms of them winning the game. Divisional games, 2 games against the Ravens, 2 games against the Bengals. They face the Cowboys. They face the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. They face the Chiefs. They travel to face the new look Atlanta Falcons. So many games where they're going to be touchdown or more underdogs. So I think they might actually pass a little bit more than expected. I think Russell Wilson is a pretty decent late round dart throw in some of these best ball drafts. I think we could see a little more volume than expected from someone like George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, maybe the 3rd round rookie Roman Wilson. But overall, I think in the run game is really that decision point when the guys are back to back. Jalen Warren, Najee Harris. Right now, I'm leaning Jalen Warren over Harris with the schedule.
So let's talk about that just real quick. The Najee versus Jalen Warren. Is it the pass catching upside that we saw last year that to lean Warren? I mean, you look at their schedule, it's tough. There's no arguing that one bit. And what makes it kind of suck for us fantasy gamers is there's a lot of like beat them down, probably defensive affairs. Not so much shootout games. So is it because you're predicting they're trailing, you get those extra dump offs to Jaylen Warren? Or could we see a passing of the guard? We know the Steelers did not accept the or did not extend Najee for that 5th-year rookie option. So what's the overall? Just kind of dive into the Warren versus Najee, because I love Najee this year, so I may need, just a little cold water sprinkled on the old head here.
So I'm not fully fading Najee Harris. I think we should get exposure to both these guys simply because it's Arthur Smith as the new offensive coordinator. It's probably there's going to be a lot that that at least tries to flow through the run game. For me, I think Najee Harris, his real elite fantasy outcomes would stem from getting a lot of work. And I just don't think the game script's going to favor that. And we kind of saw Jaylen Warren already start to eat into that last year. So that's kind of my concern, where I don't think Najee is a bad pick. But I don't know if I see the upside with the schedule and with Jaylen Warren being good enough to eat into some of that work. So that's kind of where I'm at there. But let's talk about the other side now. A cake schedule that I think is great for running backs who run the ball. So I'm obsessed with this Falcons schedule. It is cake. I have it as the easiest schedule, bar none. Ooh. Here are the games that I have the Falcons projected to lose at the Eagles. I think that's fair, right? At the Eagles.
Yeah, yeah.
They host the Chiefs. I think they lose. They host the Cowboys. I'm giving the Cowboys the win on the road there. I have it as a toss-up game when they travel to the Buccaneers. So that's a divisional game. Traveling to the Buccaneers, I think it's a toss-up. When they host them, though, I think that's a win. So games where I have them favored is that Buccaneers game where they host. I think they beat the Saints both times they play them. I think they beat the Panthers both times they play them. I think they beat the Steelers at home. I think they're going to beat the Seahawks at home. I think they beat the Broncos on the road. The Broncos are terrible. They host the Chargers. I think they squeak that one out. They travel to the Vikings. Vikings are not a good team. They travel to the Raiders, another bad team. They host the Giants. That's a bad team. They travel to the Commanders. That's a bad team. We pretty much got through the schedule. I mean, wow. The Falcons schedule is so easy. I think Bijan Robinson can legitimately have a 20 touchdown season. I think all the players in this offense have massive, massive touchdown upside. I think the Falcons are like the sneakiest team to have the number 1 seed in the NFC because they're good, not great. The schedule's just so easy. And I think this is an offense we should be very, very excited about.
So 2 things that pop out to me immediately when looking at the schedule. One is the potential buying opportunities, especially in redraft, because of course we don't get as much weight on the ages. We can kind of attack current statistics, and versus Pittsburgh, at Philly, home against Kansas City, and home against the New Orleans Saints. So let's just say they kind of flounder out of the gate. Let's say they go 2-2, 1-3. We like the remaining schedule. You talked about how cake it is. So that might present some nice buying opportunities. I like that. And the other thing that stuck out to me, in our dinosaur leagues, those are the leagues, Josh, I like to call dinosaur leagues, are the leagues that play with defenses and kickers, the dinosaur leagues. I'm going to say something right now. You're going to want to get yourself some Younghoe Koo at kicker.
Yes.
Because after the bye, they're indoors at home against the Chargers, indoors at Minnesota, indoors at Vegas, indoors home against New York. Now in the championship, if you make it that far, they're in Washington. We'll have to cross that bridge when we get to it. But I'm seeing a whole lot of offense and a whole lot of indoor potential. So I those
like
are
that.
Things that stick out to me. But of course, the leagues that play in kickers and defenses are getting smaller. So do you play in any dinosaur leagues?
I'll usually do some of those for the FFPC. That's primarily where I'll do it, since a lot of those leagues will have it. And then I'll usually do a few like high stakes public leagues on Yahoo and stuff like that, where you do have a kicker, you do have a defense. So I'll get usually like 10-ish leagues exposure each year in redraft where we're actually having to pay attention to kickers and defense. So I like the Koo take. I hadn't thought about it from that angle, because I'm just sort of in like best ball mode where we're not really drafting the kickers.
That's right.
Now.
We're in summer right now.
That's a good one. I'm gonna hold on to that. We're storing that right upstairs.
Josh, you come to the game plan so I can pick your brain, so I can beat all my idiot league mates, and you can take this little nugget from me. We'll call it a fair trade. We'll call it a deal. Yeah, you could give me 15 or so secrets that in some of your deepest dives. I'll take all that, and I'll give you one nugget about Younghoe Koo. We'll call it even. We'll keep that thing right down the board. Any other takeaways? Any of these 32 team takeaways, schedule takeaways from your research?
I'll give you two more. One, the Titans are going to need to throw a lot post Derrick Henry. Have them as the fifth hardest schedule. Just to begin with, think about the division, 2 games each. I mean, God, this division's good. Colts, probably a reasonably good team. Jaguars, a reasonably good team. I think the Texans, I have them right now as the 4th best neutral field team in the NFL. So I try to look at on a neutral field, how do I view these teams in terms of how good they are?
Right.
I have the Texans as the 4th best team in the NFL. I don't think that should be a hot take. This team's awesome. The Titans face each of them 2 times, face a lot of other tough teams. I only have them favored to win 1 game all season when they host the Patriots. So I think they're going to throw a lot. When you look at the coaching staff, it's a little bit more of a throw-oriented coaching staff. Tony Pollard, Tajay Spears, that is not really like a grinded-out committee. That's much more of a versatile kind of change of pace backs that give you explosive runs, that give you pass catching. Not really let's give this guy 20 carries. So I don't know how good the Titans are going to be. I only have them winning 6 games. Their win total is 6.5. It's juiced to the under. So Vegas thinks they're going to win 6 games. But I think they might actually give you a little bit of fantasy excitement along the way. And then the other one is I have the Jets winning their division. They have the 3rd easiest schedule compared to the Bills, who have the 4th hardest schedule. I think the Jets overall just have a more balanced, better roster than the Bills at this point. Mm-hmm. The only game that I don't have the Jets as a toss-up or a favorite is week 1. They travel to the Niners. But I have them neutral or favored in their 2 games against the Bills, the 2 games against the Dolphins, the 2 games against the Patriots. And then they've got a lot of games that I think are very, very winnable. Titans, Broncos, Vikings, Steelers, Cardinals, Colts, Seahawks, Jaguars, Rams. These are all teams that are either bad or good, not great. I think the Jets are going to have a top 5 defense with a very, very good offense.
Yeah.
And I think that this team is just ready to be a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Jets fans have waited too long for this.
4 plays of Aaron Rodgers last year was devastating, even as a Patriot fan who revels in the misery of the Green Jet fans. But even that was brutal. I mean, 4 snaps out for the season. Absolutely brutal. And then the NFL did him no favors. Like, oh, yeah, you want to make sure you're upright? Well, let's go against Nick Bosa. Let's just see what you got right out the gate on Monday Night Football. When I look at their schedule, I see a lot of, 2 games in kind of cold weather atmospheres at the end of the season. Home against the Aaron Donald-less Rams, and then at Buffalo. I'm gonna real quick. I just popped my head. I want to ask you about Buffalo, but before that, I see 2 cold weather potential games, slow games, grind them out games. You talk about a top 5 potential defense. Could this mean Breece Hall is set to absolutely feast when it matters most? Yeah,
I think Breece Hall is in a very, very good position. So we'll talk about him more a little bit later on as well.
Deal.
But we'll save that. But yes, I am all over Breece Hall.
So I want to ask you specifically about the Buffalo Bills. What kind of things, Paul? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but where do you have their record? How do you see their season playing out? It seems like they lost a ton of talent on both sides of the ball. Are you excited about the Bills?
Yeah, I think they're going to be fine. I don't think they're going to be very good. I don't think they're going to be bad. Bills fans were destroying me on Twitter. Their win total in the betting markets is 10.5. It's juiced to the under. So Vegas kind of thinks they'll probably win 10 games. I had them at 9 and 8. So I gave them 1 less win. I mean, it's a tough schedule.
How dare you?
When we look at the offense, so I started my Bills write-up and I said, to begin with, Josh Allen is the 2nd best quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes. So I gave the Bills that. And then I said, I don't actually know who their 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th best players are, but whatever it is, it's a steep drop-off. The offensive line is not very good. It's fine. The skill position group is pretty bad. I talked about how Dalton Kincaid looks on paper like he's going to be their leading receiver. I mean, if we look at all the top receiving options on all 32 teams, Kincaid would be like one of the 3 or 4 worst top receivers on an offense, right? Like there's not many teams that, like your Patriots, unfortunately, like they're in a transition. I think Drake May can be awesome, but like the receiving core there is really bad. That's worse. But there's not many teams that actually have a worse receiving core than the Bills. Dalton Kincaid, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman. This does not look like a great unit. And then on defense, they shed a lot of their secondary. 2 of their safeties are gone in Hyde and Poyer. Tre'Davious White, I know he's been dealing with injuries, but like you still at the start of the season project him to play. Well, he's not there anymore either. There's really not much. It's like Taron Johnson is a pretty good cornerback. And
yeah, he's okay.
I think this defense could be kind of fine, average-ish. I think the offense will be fine because of Josh Allen. It's a tough schedule. I have them winning 9 games. I think they are not going to win the division this year. And people seemed very heated about that. I think the Bills Super Bowl window kind of ended last year. That was their last awesome team. And like you said, they started to shed talent. The salary cap came into play. They had to just cut a few productive veterans. It's tough news for people out there. Just look at their roster. You're not going to recognize most of these names. It's bleak.
It's rough. You can't, the check always comes when it comes to these salary cap decisions. You want to load up early in the second quarterback contract to, keep that window open as long as possible. But, they really, really struggled to put together a defense that could win in December. Their offense was never really conducive to that. But with all these diminishing pieces around Josh Allen, do you think this helps him for a redraft? He's going to be going off the board as QB1, QB2 in our redraft format. So you're going to have to spend a pretty penny to bring him aboard. Do you have confidence that he will produce, getting the chance to basically play, Superman ball all the time, hero ball, running, scoring touchdowns, making plays? Or can he kind of take a step back as he's been a repeat? The first repeat QB1 in a long time. Does he take a step back from that? What do you think that all this means?
Yeah, I think he does. I think maybe the rushing goes up, but we have to remember this is a dude that's perennially throwing 30 touchdown passes. That matters for fantasy. Like how many more rushing touchdowns, rushing yards do you want to give him? He throws for a lot of yards. He throws for a lot of touchdowns. I think that does come down. I don't know how much that comes down, but I don't like when I know for almost certain that like a whole chunk of his fantasy production will come down. So could the rushing come up? Sure. Will the passing go down? Like pretty much definitely. And that's what concerns me is do you think he throws for 30 touchdowns this year? I certainly don't.
Yeah, I don't know Dalton Kincaid's going bananas. If Josh Allen
like 14, if that happens,
he's going berserk mode. So I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but I think this is the perfect time to ask this question because a lot of people that tune into the game plan are Dynasty gamers. Are you looking to sell Josh Allen in Dynasty? Given you could probably get top 3-5 QB price, a good return, is now the right time to move on from Josh Allen?
I wouldn't hate that. Yeah, what I've seen is that Allen and Mahomes have pretty much the same value right now to most people. I would take Mahomes right now.
So if you have a little Josh Allen and you could make a deal, flipping, flopping.
If you go Mahomes 1 for 1, I would just take Mahomes, similar ages, and this Mahomes supporting cast looks awesome. We'll discuss him more shortly, but the Chiefs are. I think the Chiefs are winning the Super Bowl this year. It's like who's stopping that offense right now?
Oh my God. And just the videos from the OTAs. OTAs is such a sweet, delicious morsel of football content that we all crave at this point of the year. And just seeing, the basketball shorts and t-shirt games, and the Jaguars are going on 11-on-11 or 7-on-7 with hats on. It's a great time of year. Great time of year, Josh.
It is.
We got a lot more to dive into. Josh did a whole breakdown of all 32 teams in the NFL schedule. We're going to get those secrets out from him on this episode. So you're going to stick around. But before we do, let's hear about the Dynasty Deluxe here at Player Profile.
This episode is brought to you by Player Profiler, the Dynasty Deluxe package. The rankings are the best in the industry. It includes strategy mode where you can say, hey, change the rankings to be win now. Oh, change the rankings to be productive struggle. There's also a draft planner to help you strategize where you should take players because the draft planner also includes ADP. There's a trade finder where we look up on My Fantasy League and we see trades that are done, including a particular player. Then there's a trade analyzer where you can plug in draft picks, players, and we assign a lifetime value to draft picks out 5 years. The best thing about our trade analyzer, it can't be gamed with volume. And there's mock draft data to see right now what's the market for player X versus player Y, including in the fall when very few mock drafts are happening. And our Dynasty guide, the Dynasty Dominator, would cost you $10 on Amazon, but you get it for free with Dynasty Deluxe, and you get our rookie guide for free, a $25 value. So you get all of that for $45. So I mean, it's a great deal.
Josh, Larky, Matty Kiwoom, the game plan. We're going through some some draft takes, some redraft must-have secrets from Josh Larky. So let's keep this train rolling. I wanted to ask you this before we get into the next thing. How did you come up with give us a little behind the scenes, how you developed all of this, all 32 teams, the schedule, where they fall. Just, you have to give away all your secrets, but just what went behind all that?
Yeah, so the first thing, this is the part of the process that takes the longest. I think some people think the hardest part is actually giving win probabilities to every team in every game. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is knowing how good you think every team is. So I create team tiers for all 32 teams. Like I mentioned, I use neutral field. So I think on a neutral field, how do I think teams stack up? And I start to tier them in terms of on neutral fields. I could see this being kind of a toss-up game. Or if I'm on a neutral field, this team just destroys this team. Well, we can't have them in the same tier. Some people just use win totals for this part. My big issue with that approach is that then you're factoring in strength of schedule. And I just want to know, on a neutral field, how good the team is, because then I'm going to apply how good I think each team is to the schedule. So a good example here is the Bengals have a pretty high win total. And then you look and you're like, oh, their schedule's really easy for a good team. And it's because Joe Burrow got hurt last year. They lost some games. They were doing poorly in the division, but I think they were fourth in the division last year.
So they get to play all
now
the
they get easier games.
NFL,
yeah. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, this starts to make a little more sense. The Patriots, really tough schedule actually for a bad team. So some people out there really want to bet their over on the win total. And it's like, well, you know what? It's actually a pretty tough schedule. And maybe they're not actually that bad win total wise, but it's because of the schedule. So I really try to disconnect the win totals and just do how good do I think each team is. That's the hardest part, the longest part of my research. And then what I'll do is I'll look at the betting markets to see the win totals. I didn't have to make any adjustments this year. Occasionally I'll make a couple adjustments where I try not to have hot takes. So if for some reason I had a team in the fifth tier out of 7 tiers and their win total is 11 and they're the sixth highest win total, it's probably the wrong move for me to be Josh Larky, no best. This is one of the worst teams in the NFL. So you won't see any hot takes like that. Bills fans came from my head and I was like, guys, I have you as the 10th or 11th best team in the NFL. Sorry. It's not I think the Bills were the 27th best team. No, there's never any crazy hot takes. I'm just kind of marginally higher or lower on different teams. And that's kind of the big thing with my research in terms of the time spent is I want to understand these rosters and really understand how good I think each team is, because I think there's a lot of edges with schedule analysis because it's intimidating to people. They don't want to look at all 272 games, but I do.
Hey, and that's why you're one of the best in the biz, my friend, Mr. Larky. That's a lot of research. It's a lot of time and effort that goes into it. But I mean, what can come out of it is beautiful, right? It's what makes all this a ton of fun. We talked briefly earlier in the show about some of the teams that you like based on your analysis, teams that you're going to be targeting, fading, and all that stuff. But do you have any ones that you haven't talked about yet? Just offenses, players in redraft that you're going to be targeting based off of their roster and of their schedule. And then if you have a couple more fades, drop those in too.
So targeting the Packers, the schedule is pretty neutral. I just love the Packers. They were the youngest offense in the NFL last year. There were so many injuries to the offensive line, to the skill position players. And then we look and Jordan Love was still second in the NFL in touchdown passes last year. This is a deep, good receiving core. I think they're going to be a top 8, if not top 5 offense with a pretty reasonably good defense. I believe they allowed the 10th fewest points last year and then scored the 12th most. So basically good defense, good offense last year. And I think both the defense and offense improve. I really want Packers players. I think this team could be a juggernaut. I also like the Chargers. I wrote an article on Player Profiler about why I like the Chargers. If you look at the ADPs for them on best ball sites right now, which is a good analog for redraft, the ADPs for the Chargers resemble the Patriots, Broncos, and Panthers. Those are the three teams with the lowest win totals in the NFL. I don't think the Chargers are a bottom 3, bottom 4 offense. I think they're more middle of the pack. Elite offensive line. Justin Herbert's a great quarterback. I think the Harbaugh, Greg Roman duo is very underrated. People are giving a lot of shit to Greg Roman. They're like, oh, we don't like his play call. I'm like, all right, you don't like his play calling or this or that. Let me just remind people what Greg Roman did. Greg Roman took Lamar Jackson, who everyone was convinced was terrible and wasn't a real NFL quarterback.
A running back to some, A
running back. And in his first full season as a starter, the Ravens were the best offense in the NFL. Lamar won MVP. They scored on 52% of their drives in 2019.
Crazy.
No team since has scored on that high a percentage of their offensive drives. I happen to think Greg Roman might know what they were doing. Year after year, the Ravens offenses were really good. Sure, Herbert's a different quarterback than Lamar, but I don't really care. What I like is that Greg Roman took a quarterback in Lamar Jackson that he had no experience with. He had been working with Joe Flacco, and he just immediately pivots and then makes them the best offense in the NFL. So people out there that think Greg Roman's terrible, I'm like, can you show me where in his track record you actually think this is like a total fish hire? Sorry, he's not one of these like young, new, exciting head coaches.
That's what everyone wants, yeah.
But I'm like, he is kind of exciting. Like his offenses score a lot of points. And then on the defensive side, Chargers defense was terrible last year. Only the Commanders allowed more passing yards per game to opponents. Chargers did not address the secondary on their defense until round 5 of the NFL draft. I think it's going to be a below average defense with a competent offense. I think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns. The schedule is cake. They face the Raiders twice, the Panthers, the Steelers, the Cardinals, the Saints, the Browns, the Titans, the Buccaneers, and the Patriots. There's so many games in there that I think they can win. The only games that I have the Chargers as underdogs are 2 games against the Chiefs, Bengals, Ravens, and then at the Falcons. I think every other game they're neutral or favored. I think this team's going to cook. And then the last one that I'm really targeting, the Chiefs. I mean, Patrick Mahomes with a good offensive line, and then he's throwing to Travis Kelce, who's still one of the NFL's best tight ends, but now he gets help because we have Marquise Brown coming in. Marquise Brown's a very versatile receiver. He's really, really good. They have Xavier Worthy coming in, another really excellent prospect. They traded up in the first round for him. I don't know what's going on with the Rashee Rice suspension. He'll play at some point this year. And he had a really awesome rookie year. So suddenly we have 3 young and good receivers, a good offensive line, Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco's competent. We have the best quarterback head coach duo of all time with Mahomes and Andy Reid. I think the Chiefs look like the offense that's going to score the most points by quite a bit. And all of the ADPs are palatable. Nobody is going in the top 35 picks on any platform right now for redraft from this Chiefs offense.
Ooh, a little value for us. I like to hear that. I mean,
yeah, and then
I just have quick questions about those 2 AFC West teams.
Let's hear.
How are you approaching the running back situation for LA? Because again, they're all pretty cheap. Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, and Kamani Vidal are all pretty cheap. So there's really like, how we kind of usually go, give me the cheapest option, I'll roll that way in a ambiguous backfield. But how are you, Josh Larky, playing the Chargers backfield?
I'm just trying to get exposure to all of them. I mean, if we think about Greg Roman from his Ravens days, his running backs were Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Spoiler alert, folks. Once again, his running backs are Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. We saw both of them have fantasy relevance at different times. So I think that's exciting. And then Kamani Vidal is clearly the best pass catcher, the rookie they took in the 6th round. So I'm just very optimistic that there could be fantasy points galore for guys that are all going and like, they're basically free in terms of where they go. So I want shots on all of them. So yeah, I think my favorite would be Vidal just because I think he's clearly the best pass catcher. Whereas I don't know how to rate Edwards and Dobbins just because Dobbins is coming off the Achilles. So I'm just not quite sure there. But I'm just very confident that Vidal is the best pass catcher.
Are you okay double tapping? Since you can get them both, like everyone's so
Yes.
cheap, you can just double tap at the end of the roster. Yeah, okay. That's
Yeah,
what
I've taken a lot.
Thinking.
Yeah, some double taps I've done. I've done a lot of double taps with the Chargers running backs. I've done a lot of double taps with your Patriots receivers. I mean, the whole offense is free. You ever want to stack rounds 15, 16, 17, 18? Drake May, Hunter Henry, Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, like literally everyone's free. And like the schedule's rough. They're going to have to pass. So I like taking shots on those guys.
And my question to the Chiefs, because when you look at the underdog ADP for Worthy and Brown, they're pretty close. It's not separated by a whole lot of rounds between the two. And in redraft, of course, in Dynasty, we want the younger guy. We want the rookie, of course. But for 2024 purposes, redraft purposes, who would you rather have, Hollywood Brown or Xavier Worthy for the Chiefs pass catchers?
Give me Hollywood Brown. I think we would love if Worthy ends up being like Brown with his profile. Marquise Brown's been on a lot of lower volume passing offenses throughout his career. It's kind of skewed our perception of him. When Hopkins was out 2 years ago due to suspension, Marquise Brown was pacing for like 190 targets and like 1,400 receiving yards in those 6 games. He's been a guy that has commanded 22, 24, 26% target shares in the past. And now he's in the best offensive environment of his career with a potential Rashee Rice suspension and with Xavier Worthy being a rookie. So I think there's a chance where right out the gate we go, oh my God, Hollywood Brown just looks like a league winner from week 1.
I was talking to Seth Dewald about this, and we were reminiscing on the Sammy Watkins week 1 of a few years ago, where he went for 40 points, and we were like, "That's potentially on the table for Hollywood Brown at some point." And then we were looking at each other, we're talking to each other, going, "Might be week 1. He gets that revenge game against the Ravens Thursday Night Football, extra preparation. That if Rashee Rice is suspended, even for 1 game, it's that game." So I'm loving me some Hollywood Brown in redraft because I think we're going to see an early skyrocket of value.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you want to move on from that value and make a trade or just ride it to the end, I'm liking me some Hollywood Brown. I like the fact that he's been a player that has been able to receive or earn 10, 11, 12 targets in a game. And there's going to be a few games where he's just eating. And Pat Mahomes will keep chucking to him. And I think that's on the table. He's going to have some monster games. So I love that call. Now, what are some of these teams that you're fading based on your research?
Yeah, I got 2 teams for you. We'll start off less spicy and then we'll get spicy. How about that? So
I like that.
Less spicy.
We're doing it the hot ones. We're doing a hot ones method here.
Yeah, we're going to gradually work our way up. So I'm going to be underweight on the Vikings. It's the 3rd hardest schedule. And we're getting a rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold. Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, these are all pretty expensive players. TJ Hawkins is not even all that cheap. It's weird to have this many ultra expensive options on a team without quarterback certainty. You look in the betting markets, people are not very optimistic about JJ McCarthy's year 1. They shouldn't be. He went to a great landing spot, but the history of rookie quarterbacks is pretty bleak. Teams often don't let them pass very much in the red zone because they don't trust them. I think McCarthy has the tools needed to be a good NFL quarterback. But again, when you're transitioning from a super, super low volume college offense to a Vikings team where he's probably going to have to pass a lot, I think he could be in trouble. And I just think when you look at Justin Jefferson in round 1, Jordan Addison and Aaron Jones in like the 5th and 6th round, I think 2, if not all 3 of them, don't reach ADP expectations. Here's the spice. Okay. This is not a team where I'm saying I won't be
right now, Josh, a little dab.
Yeah. I'm not saying that I'm like fully fading all the players here, but I'm trying to be careful with my Detroit Lions exposure because their fantasy playoff schedule sucks. Week 16 at Chicago, bad weather game. The Bears defense was a top 5 unit down the stretch last year. You might be like, that's just 1 week, Josh. Okay, how about week 17? So basically the 2 weeks where you need them to make money. Week 17 at San Francisco. So you're going at the Bears and at the Niners, potentially on the road facing 2 top 5 defenses to close out the year. When we look at home road splits for Jared Goff, The past 2 years, 17 games on the road, 17 games at home. Goff is averaging 1 passing touchdown per game on the road. He is averaging 2.5 passing touchdowns a game at home. 2.5 times more touchdown fantasy points in circulation for these home games versus road games. Goff does not have the strongest arm. He loves his dome environment. His yards per attempt is basically Patrick Mahomes at home, and then league average on the road. He's throwing for almost 25 more passing yards per game on the at home versus on the road. And if 2.5 touchdowns per game versus 1 touchdown per game doesn't do it for you, we'll give the full numbers over the past 17 games at home and on the road. His touchdown to interception ratio at home, the past 2 years, 42 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. The road, 17 touchdowns, 10 picks. This is not what you want to see for the Lions. It's not that I think they can't score fantasy points. I'm still going to try to get exposure to some of them, but I think we need to be very, very careful going too overweight on them, especially knowing that when all the money's won in week 16 and week 17, the Lions have 2 of the 4 or 5 hardest opponents that you could dream up for those matchups.
You're talking about Jared Goff being the modern day Drew Brees. And I just want to, I want to put a little cherry on top of what you said, because I think some people might go, yeah, but remember when they put up 31 points in San Francisco in the conference championship game? Yeah, the Lions put up 31, but Jared Goff didn't throw for 300 yards. He was at 273, 1 touchdown. So the team put up 31 points. Jared Goff only threw for 1 touchdown. It just further displays, further highlights what you're talking about. That Goff on the road, especially at the end of the year, it's gonna be tough. And I can't think of 2 worse spots in the playoffs than in Chicago and at San Francisco. People, wake up. Remember what happened to Chicago every year in the fantasy playoffs. Remember the Bills traveled there a couple years ago, minus 85 million degrees outside, wind chill. Nobody played good. Yes. It's just the worst to play in Chicago at the end. I got to ask you this. You bring up 2 stud receivers. Who do you got? Amon-Ra St. Brown or Justin Jefferson in 2024 redraft?
I will lean Amon-Ra. He's got the quarterback continuity. He's done nothing but be great. And Justin Jefferson is going to get a massive quarterback downgrade. I've talked about this on a few shows, and I just can't stop talking about it because people seem to keep ignoring it. Justin Jefferson's sample without Kirk Cousins last year is fraudulent. People talk about how, like, did you know that Justin Jefferson averaged 20 fantasy points a game in the 4 games Kirk Cousins didn't play with him last year? Folks, I knew this. I don't like that's not breaking news. If we look at those 4 games, he faced the Lions twice, one of the 3 worst pass defenses last year. Another game was against the Bengals, another one of the 3 worst pass defenses. No team allowed more yards per pass attempt to opponents last year than the Bengals. Their pass defense was terrible. And then a game against the Packers. Spoiler alert, Justin Jefferson didn't do anything against the Packers. And he had a good game, not great, against the Bengals. And then he went nuclear both games against the Lions. This is not he faced the Lions twice in 4 games. This year, he's going to play 17 games. If he stays healthy, he'll still face the Lions twice. It's like, come on, people. We can't just look at how he did versus the Lions and then start extrapolating how a defense that refused to cover him were one of those, like a game was in the dome. Of course he's going to have good games there. It was also Nick Mullins, who's throwing like 3-4 interceptions a game, but he throws for 300 yards as well. That's not going to be this team. And give me Amon-Ra St. Brown. I just think his stats can be similar to last year.
Also, when we were talking about the Jefferson potentially feasting on the Lions, they did use high-end draft capital to add to that defensive secondary. So, theoretically, they should have a better defensive secondary unit.
I think so.
That's a good point here. So when you dove into all 32 teams, I got to hear this now. Who are some of your favorite sleepers? And you can define the sleepers based on their current underdog ADP, however you want. Yeah, however you want to define it, Josh. It's up to you. But what are some of the sleepers that you came up with going into your deep dive?
So I'm just going to go off my underdog exposures. I think that's the most fair way to do it is which players going in the later rounds have I taken the most? And the number 1 name at the top of the list is Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall he has round 1 draft capital, and he went to the 49ers. Great offense, great player. And he's going in like the 12th, 13th round in drafts right now. He's basically free. Same thing could be said about Xavier Legette. The guy's basically free. Another guy with round 1 draft capital. I like Pearsall's profile a little better than Legette, but I can't deny that Pearsall has target competition. Legette does not have much of that. The offensive coordinator, or I guess the new head coach for the Panthers is Dave Canales. And I like that he's basically done back-to-back career resurrections. 2022, he works with Geno Smith and the Seahawks. Geno Smith resurrects his career. Last year, Baker Mayfield resurrects his career, gets Baker the 3-year, $100 million extension. Yeah. Now he goes to the Panthers. Bryce Young is a reasonably talented quarterback. The team invested heavily in the offensive line in free agency. So I think if Canales specifically wanted Xavier Legette, that's very good that he wanted to trade up in round 1 to get him. I think he's going to try his best to get this guy some targets. 2 more super late guys that go much, much later that I have high exposure to. My 3rd highest exposure running back is Will Shipley of the Eagles. He's basically free, direct backup to Saquon Barkley. We like this offense. Will Shipley has an all-purpose skill set, kind of like the poorest man's version of McCaffrey for that skill set. And then the other guy at tight end is Tyler Conklin. I talked pre-draft about how I was super overexposed to Tyler Conklin, and I was like, hopefully they don't take Brock Bowers. And then they didn't take Brock Bowers, and his ADP didn't change. What's going on? Conklin has 87 targets on the dot in 3 straight seasons, and he's free, catching passes from Aaron Rodgers. Conklin can be like the tight end 5 in fantasy, folks. He could have, he had over 600 receiving yards last year. He was like 60 catches, like 600 something receiving yards. We could see him have like 650 to 700 yards, 8-9 touchdowns. That's like the tight end 5. That could be Tyler Conklin. We could really see that. His target competition is Garrett Wilson. And then maybe Malachi Corley. There's really not that much there in this overall receiving game. It's pretty barren. I think Conklin's going to get a lot of targets. So very, very excited about just grabbing him at the end of all these best ball drafts. And I think if you're punting tight end in redraft, he's not the worst player to take a shot on. Again, Jets favored in a lot of games, probably going to score a lot of touchdowns. What's stopping Conklin from catching 7, 8, 9 of those?
Robert Tonyan, Tyler Conklin, Spider-Man meme. That's what I can't wait to see this year. And when you talk about the Malachi Corley, I know a lot of people are going to be excited because the lack of target competition that you just brought up. But this is a gadget guy. This is like a negative A-dot guy. He's going to have to be engineered touches, and that can go wrong. That is as risky of a player type to add to Aaron Rodgers at this point in his career that you can think of. So when push comes to shove, when the bullets are in the air, when the chaos is ensuing on an NFL game, I would fully expect Aaron Rodgers to settle with who he can trust. And he can trust Garrett Wilson. And then after that, it might be Tyler Conklin, Josh. It really might.
He could be second on the team in targets. I don't think that's the craziest thing to say.
No, right. We might see one of those offenses where the running back and the tight end are 2 and 3 in targets. I mean, that is on the that's on the table. So you got to get the Tyler Conklin late. So we talked late ADP guys, and now I want to ask you, Josh, about some early round fades. Who are these guys? So I want our listeners here, everyone watching, close your eyes, visualize the draft board. Who are these guys at the top that you do not want?
So I already talked about Justin Jefferson. I'm not going to have much of him. Another guy I'm going to be a touch under the field on. This one scares me a little more than Jefferson because of the quarterback continuity, because he's awesome, is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is already 30 years old. And I start to get concerned when it's a speed guy. We saw him down the stretch last year do nothing for us in fantasy because of the calf injury. That was at age 29. I think Tyreek's probably fine, but I'm just like, if you're making me decide between like Tyreek Hill and Jamar Chase in a lot of these drafts, 1 for 1, I'm going to take the younger receiver who also had a 50 fantasy point week last year in Jamar Chase. Like what? I think he's 6 years younger. And you might say, okay, like who else are you taking? If you're not a huge Jefferson guy, you're not a huge Hill guy, it seems like you're taking a little more Chase. The 2 guys I'm really excited about in round 1, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson. I think they have better fantasy profiles this year than Christian McCaffrey. Less target competition for both of them than McCaffrey, because we know that running backs have reduced target volume when all the receivers on the team are really good. We saw McCaffrey was actually third in the NFL for running backs and catches last year. We're no longer getting like 100, 120 catch Christian McCaffrey. That's not who he is anymore. So Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, I think are going to get more touches than McCaffrey. And they both play with Achilles tear veteran quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins are going to need to get the ball out quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think these guys just have massive upside. So those are the guys I'm kind of filling in for. And then one other dude that I just can't pull the trigger. Hard for me to take Davante Adams. He's a mid-second round pick in redraft. He's in his 30s. The quarterback room is terrible. Pick your poison between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell.
Mm-hmm.
These are not going to be efficient quarterbacks. And I think new head coach Antonio Pierce is going to run the damn ball. That's what we saw last year when he took over. And then there's actually target competition for Davante Adams too. Jacoby Myers is a pretty good pass catcher. And then we've got 2 tight ends now in Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. I just I start to squint and try to figure out how fading Davante Adams burns me this year.
That's a good point, because I know a lot of the arguments for Davante Adams is what we saw Michael Pittman eat with Gardner Minshew for most of the season last year. But I think what people need to do is kind of look at the target competition and compare the 23 Colts to the 24 Raiders, because Josh Downs is fine. We like Josh Downs, but Alec Pierce isn't necessarily a big time threat. There was really nothing of consequence in the tight end position for the Colts.
Yeah.
The Raiders are a different story. I mean, Myers is a professional. He deserves the targets. And then like the 2 tight ends, and the fact that Pierce, the most success the Raiders had, you can't deny this last year, was playing defense and running the hell out of the ball, which does kind of, I am a little confused why they didn't kind of address the offensive line earlier or the running back position at all until the end. It was kind of weird, but we'll see how it kind of pans out and what happens here in Vegas. Where do you have Vegas? I'm curious in terms of your win total, because I think that they're going to be a team that we might see as the number 1 overall pick next year in the draft.
So I have them at 6-11. I have the
only
teams that I have in my tiers. The only teams I have worse than the Raiders when I did my team tiers. So like, how do I view these teams on a neutral field? Panthers, Patriots, Broncos are the only teams I think are worse right now than the Raiders. So I think they are very much in play for the number 1 pick. I just don't see much upside in this offense or defense. And that's really the concern here is, I mean, it's hard to make a run when your quarterback room is Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell.
Yeah,
it's hard to make a run in the modern NFL. So it's like some of these teams, like I even think like the Panthers have more upside. Like Bryce Young, with some decent weapons, like you could actually see this offense being fine. Their defense has some pieces. So it's almost easier for me to talk. Like I can talk myself in to some of the teams that I ranked under the Raiders, like the Patriots, Drake May. What if he's awesome? What if he's CJ Stroud? The Broncos, like maybe Bo Nix is good and Sean Payton found his guy. Like I just don't have these exciting cases that I can make for the Raiders. I think it's going to be one of the most boring teams to watch.
I can't imagine that there was a more deflated war room than the Vegas Raiders when they were completely boxed out of the quarterback sweepstakes with that was brutal to see 6 guys selected before they picked it was a 13. It was insane to see all those quarterbacks go. But yeah, I'm with you on the Adams thing. I think it's going to be a tough. I think it's going to be a little tough for a guy that's been very productive over the course of his career. We talked about late round sleeper guys, late round targets, but let's talk about the mid rounds. The mid rounds, it's kind of like where you can win these leagues. You could be either bolster your lineup and have a ridiculous team and not be so top heavy, or you could fall flat on your face. So what are some of your mid round targets that you think some of the listeners should be looking at?
So just pulling directly from my top 10 underdog exposures, here's the mid-round guys I like. Christian Watson. I talked about how I like the Packers. He was a 4th-round pick last year. The thesis for him is the same. A 20% target share guy who wins downfield. And we actually know now that Jordan Love is good. He was a 4th-round pick last year. We didn't know if Jordan Love was good.
Yeah, right.
Now we know he's good. And the only thing is his hamstring. He's seeing hamstring specialists in the offseason.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just not quite ready to close the book when he's only played parts of 2 NFL seasons. That's not a huge sample. So the fact that we now know Jordan Love is good, and that he was the target leader when he played in games last year. 8th round smash. I talked about Marquise Brown. I think he's a smash in the 5th, 6th round. We talked about him a little bit in the Chiefs. Caleb Williams, just oh my God. People don't realize how mobile. People don't realize how mobile Caleb Williams is. I think he's a sneaky threat for 400 to 500 rushing yards. And then on top of that, the supporting cast is incredible. I truly think we could see him perform like early career Deshaun Watson in fantasy, where Watson was like the QB3, QB4, and you look and you're like, oh, he's giving you like 500 rushing yards a year, and he's an awesome passer. Caleb Williams, incredible quarterback prospect. His supporting cast is a good offensive line with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Romo Dunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift is a pass catcher. Like this team is set up for success. I think Caleb Williams is really good. I can't stop pushing the draft button on him. And then the last one is Jonathan Brooks. Why is Jonathan Brooks going in like the 8th, 9th round? Why is he not like a 4th or 5th round pick? I think he's going to get almost all the touches. He can catch passes. He can run between the tackles. He's supposed to be ready for week 1 of the NFL season. This is a player I didn't even like that much in the pre-draft process. And now I'm like, guys, we have to adjust. He was by far the first running back off the board. The Panthers traded up in round 2 and took him in the 40s. What is going on here? This is not in the past when running backs get traded up for in round 2. These guys are going in like the 4th, 5th round, like the Breece Hall, Kenneth Walker, Javonte Williams. They are not going in the 8th, 9th round as rookies like Jonathan Brooks. The hatred for the Panthers has gone too far. They fortified the offensive line this offseason, as I mentioned. Right. Bryce Young is the perfect quarterback for checkdowns. Tiny quarterback without much mobility. Sign me up for Brooks in the backfield. So I just have a ton of Christian Watson, Marquise Brown, Caleb Williams, Jonathan Brooks.
Jonathan Brooks is, the more I think about it, the more I love Jonathan Brooks in that situation. And Dave Canales, what he did with Rachaad White, I mean, that was bell cow volume, and he wasn't really good with it on the ground, to be quite honest.
They kept feeding him. They didn't care.
They didn't give a rip. He didn't care. He just kept going to him, kept throwing the ball to him. And we can see a lot of that because, I mean, Chuba Hubbard's a good backup. Miles Sanders is a roster clogger at this point for the Panthers. I love the Jonathan Brooks call. I do like that call, and I am warming up wholeheartedly to the prospect of him being a smash in 2024. So, Josh, it's been a great episode, but before I get you out of here, I got to ask you this because you did a lot of work. So, based on all your recent deep diving, have you developed or started to think about some potential bold takes for the 24 season? Because if you did, I got to hear them.
So I've been dancing around this one, Marquise Brown. I think I think he has true fantasy wide receiver 1 potential, and you can draft this guy as a wide receiver 3 in fantasy. It's a huge steal. Nico Collins. A lot of people make fun of me because I keep posting underdog screenshots where I take him in round 2. That's very funny, folks. I think Nico Collins has overall wide receiver fantasy 1, overall wide receiver 1 in his range of outcomes. I don't know how we're going to deny a guy that has insane weekly upside. Let me read some finishes. I'm just on PlayerProfiler.com looking at his 2023 game logs. Week 2, 27.5 fantasy points, wide receiver 5. Week 4, 36 fantasy points, wide receiver 3. We have some injuries. Then week 9, wide receiver 13. Week 12, 23 fantasy points, wide receiver 5. Week 13, 34 fantasy points, wide receiver 3. Week 18, 34 fantasy points, wide receiver 3. Like this is a dude who every other game was basically giving you a top 5 wide receiver finish in fantasy. Stephon Diggs might be cooked. Tank Dell is a tiny guy who's coming off a broken leg. We should be so excited about this young, big, fast receiver who just got extended. Mm-hmm. And then the spiciest one. So I think the Lions are a very good football team overall. Their schedule's hard. I think the Packers are good. I think the Bears are good. If you look at my win total predictions at Larky Tweets, you can see that pinned tweet. You will see that I think the NFC North, it's pretty close. And I think my boldest take that I think can actually happen. Lions finish 3rd in the division behind the Packers and the Bears.
I mean, you had Bills Mafia throwing their kids through tables at the beginning of the show, and you're going to get the Lion Nation, the one pride. They're going to get their hairs up in a bunch. They're going to get their panties in a bunch. That's spicy. 3rd in the division? People are already anointing them the NFC champs.
Mhm.
They might even be
Yeah.
the NFC North champs.
I think they are more likely to finish third in the division than to be the NFC North or the NFC conference champs. I'll put it that way. I think that's more likely.
Ooh. You saved the spice for last. I love it, Josh. Great episode, brother. Thank you so much for coming on the game plan and giving us some of your best secrets, these 2024 redraft secrets that everyone needs to dominate their redraft leagues. Please let everybody know what you work on, where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at JLarkyTweets. I've got the Dominator on the Player Profiler Podcast Network each week. And you will start seeing some content soon from me on another fantasy platform shortly. So get ready for that.
No, that's exciting. Cannot wait for that. I was hoping I was going to get the exclusive right here in the game plan, but I understand. You gotta unveil it when the time's right. Everyone should be very, very excited for some of that stuff that's going to be coming out real soon. Make sure, ladies and gentlemen, that you are subscribed to the Player Profiler YouTube channel. Like this video. Let's get those numbers up. Smash that like button. Make sure you leave a comment. What did you like about this episode? What do you maybe disagree with this episode? Either way, we want to hear it here on the game plan. I'm at Matty Kiwoom on X. Game plan, trade gods, all that good stuff you can find here at playerprofiler.com, and head over to the draftrankings.com if you just can't get enough of my shite. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I will see you next week, so keep game planning, my friends. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.